The meeting is now live.
Hello, welcome everybody. I think we're all here. Can I have apologies for absence, please?
I've received no apologies for absence. Mark, do you have the notes to read before the start of the meeting?
I've got the agenda.
Do you have the chair's agenda in front of you?
No, I don't at the moment, no.
There are some notices that you need to give before the meeting starts.
Okay.
It was emailed yesterday. Do you need me to email it to you again?
Yes, could you email it to my other address? Is that possible or not?
I'm afraid this is a public meeting now. The public will be able to hear if you give.
Would you like me to carry out those duties?
Yeah, if you could do that, Simon.
In place of Mark, good morning. Welcome to this meeting of the Housing Supervisory Board. The chairman is Councillor Mark Jones, chair of the board. I'm obliged to inform you that this meeting is being streamed live and recorded. Members of the public will be able to hear the audio of the meeting and view the papers shown on the screen. This meeting is being held using remote technology, and should any committee members experience technical difficulties during the meeting, you should immediately contact the designated IT officer on the number that they've already been supplied with. Everyone is requested to mute your microphone unless asked to speak. Please only use the chat function to indicate the desire to speak. Do not use it for anything else so that it is clear who is asking to speak. The debate must be heard by those listening to the audio feed. As chair, Mark will interpret the council's existing standing orders in light of the requirements of remote participation, with advice from the monitoring officer prior to making a ruling. At the start of the meeting, he will ask members of the committee to confirm their presence and any disclosable pecuniary interests they have in any of the items on the agenda. He will ask everyone that speaks during the meeting, including members of the committee and officers, to introduce themselves each time before they speak. This is so that those listening know who is speaking. He'll now turn to items on the agenda. So Mark, if I hand over to you now, you can start with the agenda from apologies. Okay.
Okay. So firstly, we better make sure everybody's online. So if I just go through the members to say whether they're here or not. So is Pauline D with us?
Yes, I'm present, Chairman.
Rob Gittins?
Present, Chair, no interests.
Okay. Vincent Hunt?
Present, no interests.
Simon Jones?
Present, no pecuniary interests.
Heather Kidd? Is she supposed to be with us, Julie?
Yes, she is. I've not received her apologies. She may be late joining the meeting.
Okay. Celia Motley?
Present, no pecuniary interests.
Tony Parsons?
Present, no pecuniary interests.
And last but not least, Keith Roberts?
Yeah, present, Chair, and no pecuniary interests.
Okay, thank you. Do I need to introduce everybody else who's in the meeting from the council? Julia?
No, not unless you wish to. Officers should introduce themselves before they speak.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so if we move on to item 3, minutes of the meeting held on the 11th of June 2020. I presume you've all read them, and does everyone accept them?
I'll second the. I'll second that we accept those as a correct record of minutes.
Okay, can we just have a raising of hands on that with physical hands? Is that all right? Thank you very much. That's carried. Public question times. I think there's a question from a councillor, Andy Boddington. I think Jane is going to lead on this. Is Jane with us?
Yes, I am, Councillor Jones. I'm happy to read out the question and the answer.
Okay, thank you.
This is a question from Councillor Boddington. He asks, the launching of Cornovii Developments Limited by Shropshire Council has been welcomed by councillors. Along with ensuring enough housing is built, our council also wishes to promote high quality design. What plans does the Housing Supervisory Board have to promote design of the highest quality through Cornovii Developments and thereby provide exemplars for other developers? So the response that is proposed is that Cornovii Developments Limited, CDL, Shropshire Council's wholly owned local housing company, has been established to achieve a number of the council's aims and objectives, the primary one being to address unmet housing need in the county. The vision for housing in Shropshire, as defined in the housing strategy, states that all homes are well designed, decent quality homes of high quality, which will protect Shropshire's unique urban and rural environments and ensure it is a great place to live. Cornovii Developments has responded with a commitment to realising this vision across its ambitious 5-year development programme of over 950 homes, with its corporate values of quality, service, community and sustainability. The Housing Supervisory Board represents the Council as sole shareholder of Cornovii Developments. It receives regular reports on the company's business and takes a close interest in how it is progressing its activities to meet and exceed the Council's planning and building control standards. In particular, Cornovii Developments intends to promote high quality design through the adoption and monitoring of challenging build standards. These include adopting the larger nationally described space standard and all homes being built to a high fabric specification to limit their impact of development on the environment. Specifically, Cornovii Developments has set out 3 levels of building fabric standard for their new homes. Their minimum eco standard, which is 20% higher than building regulations and has an energy performance certificate rating of B. An Eco Smart standard with an energy performance certificate rating of A, and a carbon neutral standard which matches those of Passive House. Each development will be tailored to meet unique local requirements and designed by carefully selected architects using quality products and, where possible, local builders and companies to maximise the Shropshire pound. Given the Council's climate emergency declaration and commitment to carbon reduction, it is more important than ever to lead by example and demonstrate that value for money, quality and innovation is achievable on all new homes. The Housing Supervisory Board can support the ambitions that the Council has set for Cornovii Developments in establishing the company. It is positive about the future growth of high quality housing in Shropshire, and looks forward to seeing them deliver much needed new homes to ensure everyone can live in the right home and in the right place. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Jane. Obviously, I don't think Andy Boddington is listening, but I presume that he am. Oh, he is. Excellent. Oh, that's ideal. Do you want to ask a further question, Andy, or?
To comment, that was a very detailed reply, and thank you very much, Jane. That was very useful. If we could have a copy of that in writing, as my note taking wasn't quick enough, it would be very useful indeed. And just to emphasise, design is not just about the standards of building, but about the way they look too, that they make you feel good and in a community that is a place to live. But we can pick that up perhaps on future occasions. Thank you.
Okay, that was Andy Boddington. So if we move on to item 5, which is the members' question time, or was that in the members' question time? Okay, so we'll move to number 6, which is the Housing Supervisory Board Terms of Reference Review and Governance. I think Jane wants to lead on this as well again.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. So the Housing Supervisory Board Terms of Reference Review and Governance. This paper refers to the role of the Housing Supervisory Board itself, which is to provide oversight of the company's actions and performance on behalf of the Council as sole shareholder. The shareholder agreement between the council and Cornovii regulates the relationship between the council as shareholder and the company, and the terms of reference for this board set out its role and responsibilities as the representative body of the company shareholder. It has now been 14 months since the board agreed its terms of reference, and over that time Cornovii has moved to actively progress its first 3 developments and has succeeded in getting planning consent on one site, submitting applications for others, initiated its first contractor tender process for a construction contractor, and has moved forwards towards purchasing its first sites. It is also identifying more land that it wishes to acquire, both from the council and from private landowners, in order to meet its ambitions to build its programme target of 950 homes over 5 years. Cornovii is also expanding its staff team so that it can meet the requirements of this programme and appointing contractors and consultants to support its activities. In order to ensure that the council's governance arrangements continue to provide the appropriate oversight of these activities, it's proposed to bring a governance review paper to the next Housing Supervisory Board meeting for discussion. And the purpose of this is really to ensure that the governance structures remain appropriate to the council's original purpose, whilst reflecting the growth and evolution of the company. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, so do we need to, anybody want to ask some questions on that section? I can't see anybody lifting any hands, or is there any hands lifted, Julie? I am speaking to myself at the moment.
Sorry, Mark, I'm just checking to see if anybody has requested to speak. No, nobody's requested in the chat to speak.
Okay, so
Chairman, it's Mark Barrow, if I can just mention something.
Okay.
For those of you members that haven't met Jane before, Jane is my Assistant Director for Homes and Communities, and very ably kind of started off on this agenda. But just to make it clear, Chair, that line of responsibility for me through Jane is something that we've now formalised on Jane's appointment. So in many ways, Jane's going to be my lead officer that's going to support the Supervisory Board. So just to make that clear as part of the governance.
Excellent. So if there's no more speakers, the recommendation is that the Housing Supervisory Board receives a report in its January 2021 meeting, reviewing the governance arrangements in place for the council as shareholder of Cornovii Developments Limited, and the terms of reference of this meeting attached in Appendix A. Please, can I have a seconder, please?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Simon. So we confirm that item's been sorted. Do we need a vote for that, or is that happy as ever it is, Julie?
No, no, you don't need to take a vote as long as nobody objects.
Okay, so item 7. Consent to appoint Cornovii Developments Limited Board of Directors. I think Jane wants to lead on this again.
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Okay.
Thank you very much. So this report now recommends that the Housing Supervisory Board gives its consent to appoint the Cornovii Development Limited Board of Directors. This is in accordance with the Shareholder Agreement Schedule 1, Shareholder Consent Matters, Part A, Corporate Matters, item 24, to give all the detail, which is the consent of the Housing Supervisory Board is required to appoint or dismiss any director. It is a requirement of the shareholder agreement under the shareholder consent matters that approval is given by the Housing Supervisory Board for all board appointments and changes. Housing Supervisory Board members will recall that they have previously been advised in detail of the recruitment, selection and training processes for the appointment of these CDL board directors, which was carried out earlier this year. However, this report is now formalising these appointments for the record, and the appointments are compliant with the CDL Articles of Association and with the shareholder agreement. So for avoidance of doubt, CDL is requesting your consent for the appointment of the following directors to support Harpreet Riat as Managing Director and Chair of Cornovii. So there are 3 independent board members who are Chris Poulton, Derek Humphreys and Richard Cambray, and their experience and details are set out at paragraph 7.5 of this report. There are then 2 council officer board members, and those are Hayley Owens and Leela Cotty, with their details set out at paragraph 7.6. And there is 1 council nomination, which is Tim Pritchard, whose details are set out at paragraph 7.7. So the recommendation is now for those directors to be formally approved by the Housing Supervisory Board. Thank you, Chair.
I'll move the recommendation.
That's excellent. Myself and Simon and Jane attended the last board meeting, and I thought the quality of directors was great, and it's moving well forward. So I couldn't quite hear who moved that.
As Pauline D.
Oh, Pauline D moved it, and a seconder.
Keith Roberts, I'll second it, Chair.
Thank you, Keith. Okay, I presume that's taken. We don't need to vote on that.
No, again, as long as you're all in agreement.
Yeah. So item 8 is the Cornovii Development Update Report. I think Jane's having another go at that as well. Busy today. Is Harpreet not with us today? I can't see him on here, but
Harpreet is with us today, Chair.
Okay.
I'm quite happy to kick this off, and then if Harpreet wants to add any further detail, then he's very well placed to do that, if that's okay. So the company has been progressing the development of its first 3 sites in Shrewsbury, Ellesmere and Ifton Heath, with planning permission granted in August for the Crowmore site for 33 homes. And that programme will see demolition start later this month and a start on site from January, subject to the satisfactory conclusion of the tendering process. And that scheme is being tendered on the Cornovii Eco and Eco Smart specifications, which were mentioned earlier. The Ifton Heath site has discussion continuing with the planning department regarding the demolition of the school, but following feedback and review of the draft local plan, CDL has prepared a revised scheme for 36 homes, which addresses the concerns that were raised through the consultation. And a new planning application is due to be submitted later this month, with a decision then anticipated by March. Then the Ellesmere Wharf site, CDL is now proposing a development of 23 homes. There are multiple constraints and abnormals associated with that site, which are summarised at paragraph 6.3 of this report. So those are the sites. There is then a virtual tour of sites now planned via Microsoft Teams on the 20th of this month, in order that the board and other stakeholders can better appreciate the proposed Cornovii pipeline and its current and future opportunities. I'm sure Harpreet will tell you more about that. And then the company is also exploring other ways to address housing need in Shropshire, and has now issued a tender for advice on the market opportunities for private rented sector housing in Shropshire. And that brief will look at what that market is for private rented sector homes, give better definition to that around the property type, size, location and potential rental income for CDL, make recommendations for a private rented sector model for CDL, and produce a high-level business plan. And the intention of doing this is to be able to include a business case for private rented sector housing in Shropshire later on within the council's capital strategy next year. Cornovii has now awarded a contract to provide the company with branding and marketing services for an 18-month period, and that's gone to a Shrewsbury-based company called Reach Media. This is an essential part of Cornovii's activities in order that it can establish itself within the sector and effectively effectively market its homes and engage positively with communities. And there is a new Cornovii website set to be launched at the end of January 2021 as a result of this work with Reach, as well as an 18-month marketing plan being drawn up with the company's sales agents to include a social media launch strategy. So I'll be very happy now to hand over to Harpreet if you would like to add any more detail about those points.
Harpreet, are you with us?
He was earlier.
Heather Kidd wants to ask.
Apologies, Chair.
Okay.
Yeah. Would you want to take the question from Councillor Kidd first?
Yes, Councillor Heather Kidd wants to ask a question. Heather.
Hello. I'm really interested in the private rental sector. I think that could be very good for competition with the private rented sector if we're providing high quality. I presume you would be charging absolute open market rental, or would it be better than that? And how would we deal with those tenancies? Because we know that buy-to-let and so on can have significant issues with tenancies and people in properties. And I would hope that anything that the council was involved in would have a robust scheme of making sure that we could deal with any antisocial behaviour, because that happens regardless of how much rent people are paying.
Chair,
Yep.
Jane, would you like me to pick this up, or?
Go ahead, Harpreet. Yes, I'm happy for you to.
Yeah, first of all, yeah, I think firstly, Councillor Kidd, it's a great opportunity for Cornovii, and part of the reason why we are commissioning this study is first of all to help us with the understanding the type of margins and the type of properties we should be building and where we should be building those properties, but also to give us some advice around some of the internal processes and systems we need to put in place which ensures that we manage properties in the most appropriate way, while also factoring into account the quality of and sizes of properties as well. I think the point about right to buy, that wouldn't apply to ourselves because it would be a private sector offer, and what we will also do, and a lot of councils have done this as well, is to look to work with a specialist private rented consultancy who would manage the properties on our behalf. And we would obviously look to tender that and make sure they've got experience of working with other local authorities who have recently set up a private rented sector arm. But I think that's hopefully a lot of that information will come out of the study as it moves forward.
Okay, I think Heather just wants to clarify the question that she asked, actually.
Yeah, it wasn't about, I didn't think for 1 minute we would be doing right to buy. What I was suggesting was actually there are issues with private sector landlords and antisocial behaviour and so on, and we would be, as right to buy is, a private sector landlord, and therefore we would need a mechanism of dealing with the tenancies, and that was my point.
Okay, Harpreet, do you want, we have got a question from Pauline, but whether we perhaps leave that until you've had your presentation, and then we'll ask Pauline to come in afterwards.
The only thing I was going to mention, because Jane has summarised the report really well and all the key points that has come out of what Jane's outlined, is just around the virtual tour. As outlined, because of the issues associated with COVID, we've not been able to do the coach tour, which was something we were aiming to do between September and October this year. So what myself and the rest of the Cornovii team are hoping to do in a couple of weeks' time is to show yourselves and the CDL board across some of our sites, hopefully about 10, to look at some of the proposed layouts, some of the site constraints, and to discuss the potential next steps to take these sites forward. So it's a kind of preview of what we're currently doing, which are outlined in the report, our pipeline, and also future opportunity. So we really hope that as many members of the Housing Supervisory Board can attend that session in a few weeks' time.
Okay, Pauline, did you still want to ask a question? Councillor D?
Please. Yeah, I'm not sure whether I've asked this before, but will priority be given to local residents? Because we notice here in Wem that there are a lot of people moving from the south up
up this way, and you know, and I just want to make sure that it isn't a relative of somebody who's already living up here who's going to try and come and take in on the private renting, because we have such a problem at the moment with for local people to be able to afford to go into private accommodation. It's something that I think all councillors are constantly, you know, being not badgered, but having inquiries from local people, and that's, you know, really the big thing with me.
Did you want to answer that, Harpreet or Jane, or not that comments?
Jane, do you want me to?
Yeah.
Do you want to, ladies first.
Thank you. I was just going to make the comment that obviously Cornovii is a private company. It's not the council. So unlike Star Housing or the registered providers, obviously this is market level housing as opposed to affordable subsidised housing. So it's not being allocated. It will be let commercially through a lettings company on behalf of Cornovii, I anticipate. At some point, there can be decisions made about whether we want to, whether Cornovii, I should say, would like to prioritise where it does its advertising, for example, for these properties in order to encourage opportunities for local people to take them up. But I think it's important to appreciate that that the council's not in a position to tell Cornovii to let properties at a lower rate or to particular groups. That's not part of what it's been set up to do.
Can I come back, Mark? It's not about a lower rent, because people here well, I'll be parochial, in Wem, in my division, they're still paying you know, market value, market rent, but they're, you know, they just have no security. I mean, I've just had one just this week, and somebody who wants to sell their house and they're out, you know, a young family. So it's just it's our local people, and we would have much more support from the local population who live near these houses, who, you know, or live near the sites, and I'm particularly thinking of Wem. If people realise that it would be that our young people, and or not particularly young people, elderly people, going, if there were bungalows, that it's the local people get the first. Well, if the advertising is done first in Shropshire or in this way, because I mean, you're much more experienced than I am, perhaps, but I just feel that there are so many people wanting to move away from the cities that we could get inundated with. I don't want to say outsiders, but people that are coming from other counties.
Councillor Jones, could I come in at that point? Thank you. Yeah, Councillor D, one of the things that I've discussed with the Cornovii board is that we are very much focused on meeting unmet housing need, and very much that's a local issue. And while we do need to maximise value on behalf of the shareholder, what we have said we will do is advertise normally for the first 14 days voluntarily and put a local connection for many of our properties. And I think that's something we may be able to consider as part of the private rented sector offer. We would obviously have to take the appropriate advice, but I think it's something that the Cornovii board would be quite supportive of, because it's in line with our original remit, kind of echoing what Jane has said around the advertising and making sure, you know, as a commercial venture. But I think it's also important that we do look at that, and it's something we're committed to do with Crowmore, with Ifton, with Ellesmere, and hopefully with some of our other sites going forward. And I think it should be across all tenures as well.
Councillor Jones, can I add a further point, please?
Yes.
Just in response to Councillor Kidd's comment earlier, that I very much agree that this is an opportunity if Cornovii are able to move into the private rented sector zone of work, that they can show a really good example of how to do this well, with high quality management of the properties, giving people good security of tenure, so making sure that you know, they show how this can be done really well, and I think it's quite an exciting opportunity for us to be able to set a challenge, if you like, to other private sector landlords out there as to how to do this extremely well, and quite looking forward to that.
Oh, excellent.
That was an excellent answer, Jane. Well done. I think Simon Jones, does he want to come in? He's typing, so don't know whether he wants to chat or if everybody else is happy, then we need to note. So
Yeah.
we need to note the developments.
Yeah, I was actually going to propose the recommendation.
Okay.
Chairman, before you take any vote or anything, I just wanted, it's Councillor Cecilia Motley here. I'm very sorry, I have got a very, very bad connection. And I can't get a camera up at all. But I just wanted to throw a thought into the mix here, which is that there are a lot of large privately owned estates in Shropshire, both north and south. A lot of, most of them in the private rented sector. I just wonder, and a lot of them at the moment are doing whole estate plans, which I think perhaps Mark Barrow is probably aware of. I'm just wondering whether there is any mileage at all about investigating what some of those are doing and looking to see whether there is any opportunity for crossover with them, possible partnership with them, or just at least having a word with them to see how they're doing things.
Harpreet, do you want to come back on that?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Jones. I think there's definitely some advantage for us to learn from what others are doing within Shropshire currently, and if there is a growing private rented sector offer, it's something I'm hoping that the piece of work we've commissioned will confirm to us, and some of the outcomes that these different organisations are looking for. So I would welcome if anybody has any contacts for these estates to send those across to myself, Jane and Jamie, and then we can investigate that further and include it within our commission.
I can come up with a few for you, just for starters, probably, Harpreet.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Councillor Motley.
Okay. Simon has seconded the recommendation, so I presume
Simon proposed it, Mark. I seconded it.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Heather's coming back with a question, but I think we're probably too late, Heather. So if we could just move on to the next section, and she can probably ask questions later. So we now need to exclude the press and the public. So I move that in accordance with the provisions of the Schedule 12A Local Government Act 1972 and paragraph 10.4 in brackets 3 of the Council's Access to Information Procedure Rules, the public and press be excluded for the consideration of the remaining business. Can I take a vote on that, please?
I'm happy to second. I'd vote for it.
Could we all just raise our hands if I can see a few of you? I presume that is carried. Thank you very much. So if we could exclude, if Julie, could you remove any